We're going to call this meeting to order. This is the Duluth Public Schools, ISD 709. This is our monthly committee of the whole meeting, a meeting where we have no topics that we vote on as a board, but we certainly find the committee of the whole meetings where presentations, information, updates, and vital information for board members and for community and for our presenters to be involved in. So we welcome you. It is Tuesday, October 4th, and Clerk Oswald will take roll.
Member Eater.
Present.
Member Kirby.
Here.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Here.
Chair Lopo.
Here.
Hey, Member Oswald, here I am. Member Sadowski. Here. Member Sandholm.
Present.
Superintendent Magus.
Present.
Assistant Superintendent Bonds.
Present.
Finance Director Lunick.
Present.
HR Director Severance is excused, as is our student reps, but we also have Board Secretary Kara. Yeah. We are all present and accounted for.
Thank you, Clerk Oswald. And again, as we've seen in our board book, board members, we have an agenda, and on the agenda under B, informational items, we have presentations of class size and enrollment update. So I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Bonds and we'll look at those information. And then Assistant Superintendent, would you like our questions as we go along, wait to the end?
No, we can ask questions along the way.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be appropriate.
That's typically what we do, even though sometimes we set out another direction, so it's good to
And I do have
clarify.
others in the room. I have other directors in the room, Director Sparks and Director Larva is in the room. I'm looking around like, and Larva with the mask on. And they are also here because they may chime in with some clarity and some questions or other information as well. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to our committee of whole meeting. We will start off, even though I say we were going to start off with class sizes, actually we're going to change course and we're going to actually look at the October report. So let's take a look at the October enrollment. So let's start with our enrollment report and then we will then shift to our class sizes. So if everyone can go to the tab that says October monthly report. So it says 22-23 October monthly report.
Anthony, the October monthly enrollment report, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
And then it's up on the
And we
screen.
also have it up on the screen. So I know the board has had a chance to review this document, so I wanted to just do a quick overview of what it is actually sharing here. And I'll just start with Condon Park. School designation is 435. If you ever wondered like what those numbers mean, that's the actual school's number designation in our budget code. So they have an enrollment, current enrollment as of October, 453. So current enrollment at Condon Park is 453 students. And you see that we have, of those students that are in grades 1 through 5, that's 389. And then you have it broken down by grade level. So that is how you read this report. So then you see what, I'm not going to go through all of them, but then you see the other enrollments for our other elementary schools, and then midway through the document you will see our Lincoln Middle School and Orleans East Middle School. I'll start with Lincoln Middle School, which has a current enrollment as of October of 597 students. Orleans East has a current enrollment as of October of 1,075 students, and they just ignore the 0.15 because these are actual ADMs. So this is how we actually calculate funding. So it gets a little trickier when you go into the secondary. That's why you start seeing percentages there. But then you also see the enrollments for our other secondary sites as listed. So our total enrollment as of October is approximately 8,172 students. Any questions on this enrollment report? I just want to make sure that you were able to.
What's the budget for?
That's what my question is. What did we budget for? It was pretty close to that, wasn't it?
8,005.
Oh, that's
So
right,
we're
yeah.
up a little bit, and we're also up from May of last year to a little over 211.
Yeah, that's on a document
Yes.
in the
Which
report
is-
too,
that's
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
Very positive news for the district to be up 200 students.
And I do want to provide a little clarity on that at the very beginning, because it also sounds as if we are up 200, that's as of October. But you'll see that throughout the year, we do lose students, so that 200, unfortunately, as students ebbs and flow, we usually will lose students throughout the year for a variety of reasons. So I just don't want it to be perceived that we're up 200 students right away.
But we
I'm
gain
sorry.
students also, but overall it's a loss, right?
That's correct.
We want to make sure that we understand that.
I'm not sure.
I just
I can
wanted,
watch for
I
you.
just wanted an explanation between, like Congan and Homecroft, just top elementary,
Okay.
where it says the totals for grades 1 through 5 doesn't match up with the total enrolled. So are those kids in preschool program, or are they just enrolled but not showing up?
Kindergarten maybe?
You're talking about kindergarten. So are you?
So they'd be kindergarten, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay, so that difference between the first total enrollment number and total grades 1 through 5, that is.
Those are
Why do we
kindergartens.
break that out like that?
I'm not sure. It may be a funding source, but I'm not sure why we do that.
You mean the grade 5 one?
Yeah, why do we have kindergarten in its own, and then total enroll, and then that total grade 1 through 5? Why don't we?
That is an MDE requirement for reporting.
Good to know.
So is everyone clear then on the enrollment in where we are right now?
And then Member Loeffler had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. This might just be helpful for anyone listening, is when you go down to the residential programs, can you just clarify, like Merritt Creek, is that kindergarten through 5th grade? Kind of what grade levels fall under those programs? That just might be helpful.
In this situation, we are only identifying the students that are already in grades, at the elementary level, grades 1 through 5. And as you go across, you will see the number of students. So for example, there are 2 kindergartners.
Oh, okay, I
Three.
gotcha. Okay,
Okay.
Okay.
So on this document, we are.
okay.
And so we service our residentials just like we do other programs. So for instance, when we say we have 13 students currently in our hospital opportunity there for education, our staff go into hospital sites to educate and homebound our students.
That is correct.
Okay. I don't remember seeing the hospitals broken out in other reports. Have I just overlooked that? They've always been there as a classification?
I thought they were always there.
Okay.
I actually thought it was new too.
Member Sandholm?
Thank you. I think this is maybe just for everybody's knowledge, when we talk about Merritt Creek and Chester Creek, their enrollments are basically determined by the regular residential site program, that would be Northwood. Because there's a limited number of spaces in Merritt Creek Academy, Chester Creek Academy.
To be honest, I-
And the enrollment numbers there aren't determined by ISD 709, correct?
Those are the number of students that are in those programs, but Jen, would you happen to have some information on how the enrollments are established there?
For like Merritt Creek?
Merritt Creek, Chester Creek. Does Northwoods determine those numbers?
No, they'd be enrolled in at the school at Merritt Creek. It wouldn't be like Northwood's giving us the numbers. They're actually enrolled in that school.
But the cap on any of those numbers is not determined by ISD 709.
The staff?
The cap,
Or the cap?
I'm sorry.
Like how many they?
Yeah, the maximum number of students that could be enrolled there is not determined by us. Isn't that correct?
That I'm not sure of. I don't supervise Jacob enough to know that, I guess.
And that's something that I can see some clarification on that, but I know what you're getting at is, and typically in those kind of programs, there might be caps that students per staff ratio because of the needs of the students. So there might be caps to how many students they put in a given room. But how about if I
So
seek some
my experience
clarification?
as a principal might be that you wouldn't necessarily like, oh, I need this kid to go to Merritt Creek. They might be put on a waiting list if that's what you're talking
Yes,
about.
yes,
There's
yes,
a waiting
yes.
list for kids, so yeah, okay.
And I think the second thing is space over there. I was over there just recently and went through all the classrooms, and they're not that large. And I think space probably plays a factor in how many kids can be there too.
Thank you.
And maybe just another clarification, in those programs, they're all taught by Duluth Public Schools teachers and staff.
That is correct. And they receive additional services and supports by those agencies as well.
And then can you clarify why 442 is a bullet? If you see it in the middle of the AEO Denfeld and East, what is that?
That identifies or reflects the number of, when we say enrollments, those are the number of actual application students submit. For example, we may have students at East who may take a 0 hour, or a student at East or Denville may take a class if they cannot fit a class into their schedule. They can enroll into an AEO course or class, but they do that through an enrollment process. So there's an actual enrollment that takes place there. So there were 442 students in October that submitted for a enrollment into an AEO class.
Just like one.
It could be one class.
Because then what's the 139 on their total enrollment?
Those are the actual total enrollments, so those are the actual ADMs, and it gets really tricky with AEO. I want to
It does,
make sure
yeah,
that's really clear, that it gets really tricky with AEO because not all of our AEO students are full-time. So some of our students are full-time and some of them are part-time, so they could take 1 or 2 classes. Even students from other districts could also take 1 or 2 classes, so they're not considered full-time. So all of those classes end up calculating to an ADM, right? So that 139 may not reflect an actual number of bodies.
Is the easy way of this, is the easy way to say that the 139.85 is made up of 442 students? I mean, the 442 students make up that number.
That's
Because-
exactly correct.
My understanding that their numbers are up a bit this year. Is that correct, Simone?
I'm sorry?
It's my understanding that their numbers are up a fair amount this year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That's what we're hearing.
And we just passed a resolution last month for Cook County to access AEO
Yeah.
math classes and stuff like that, so that contributes to your.
That's true. And we do have AEO numbers and ALC numbers that we will also review today as well. So with regards to this document, are we comfortable so far? All right, so then let's go to the month by month enrollment changes. So it would say 22, 23, October, month by month.
Month by month and month by grade? Month by month by school?
Month by school. So that you are able to also understand the designations here. So that's EOY is end of year. So we have end of year of 2022. So at Congdon Park, for example, end of year, they were sitting at 488 students. In September of this year, it's 456 students. As of now, in October, they're sitting at 453 students. And then so you can go across and see the difference. They are down 35 students at Congdon Park as of this month compared to the end of last year. So same thing, same process for all of the other schools, and at the very bottom, you will see at the end of the 2022 school year, we ended with 7,961 students or ADMs. In September, there were 8,170 students. As of October, there's 8,172 students.
This might be more of a question for like a Brenda, maybe, or maybe not, just, as a, maybe we could see it as an advantage. I know Congdon has had building usage capacity tight, not enough classrooms, does this give them a little bit more space or really not enough to make a significant difference for our content classes? Like, I know that when I visited there, the narrow hallways and every classroom and every office space is used. Is that any different now, or?
Well, like I know one of their classrooms, they're setting up as a STEM type lab. So they're able to do some of those things because
They had a little
they
bit
don't have
extra.
600 kids
Yeah,
in there.
because they've come to us before with building usage and just not the availability to do some creative things like that. And so,
they never
I'm
necessarily
happy if that is something that gives Congdon some advantage to being a little bit under, not significant, but
It does, and so I guess it's always gonna be something, since this is obviously a work session, it's debatable, because we would, Ability might see that if they move from 600 students down to 488 students, that also can speak to, well, where are those students going,
oh, for sure,
right?
for sure.
So why are
Yeah.
we losing students there? Is it because they're going to private?
Maybe they went to
parochial,
Holcroft because they're up,
or,
or,
right, did they
Lakewood
move?
is up, yeah.
Right, because of relocation. And they also maybe attend another program in our school. So
Yeah.
we know that many of our students in some of our schools
Went to
take advantage of our nurturing program. Right, so those are things that, we start asking those really good questions on, well, why are they down, and
Yeah.
why are some schools increasing their enrollment? Right, so any questions related to how to, Mrs. Deere,
So Lester Park is bumped up quite a bit. What is the capacity of that school?
It's a very good question. They're at 21 sections right now. They can have 22 sections.
They can't, or
They can.
They can, okay.
But preschool also is there, so it takes over some of their space
And
too.
we had the issue with moving the preschool, some issue with Lester Park preschool, didn't we? Because they
Yes.
needed space.
Right.
Mhm.
ECFE.
ECFE, yeah, okay, perfect. Okay.
And I think that we have a report later that goes into greater detail on the elementaries, but I think those are really important and broad questions when we think about capacity of the building, when we think about boundary areas, when we think about all of those factors as far as how different classes are funded, whether a school is getting title in comp ed money or not. Those are all things that we can discuss.
Member St. Home?
Yeah, what is the date we first present these numbers or submit these numbers to MEP? Isn't that at the end of this month?
She just did it last Thursday.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, so that we can, I'm sorry.
29th was a report was due, sorry.
Just back to the Lester Park question, and if it's gonna be presented later, that's fine. So, because we did get concerns from ECFE parents and that, did they cap the number of kids, or they just are doing more shared space to meet the needs of the early childhood families at Lester Park?
They are sharing space, but they had to reduce the amount of seats they can offer in ECFE.
But parents were offered the opportunity to go to other sites,
Yes.
which is often the case too.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's what make sure I was factual on. It did reduce programming in ECFE there. All right, so then let's take a look at the next report, I guess. The other one is month by grade. That's really, I guess we can just take a quick look at it. We can quickly go through it. It's pretty straightforward in terms of what it's providing us. I'm not sure if it's a lot of beneficial information, but same thing, you can take a look month by month, the changes that occur. So we start with September and the changes that occur in October.
So oftentimes the losses might have been students that enrolled, but then just decided to go with that, or they went somewhere else, or they made family changes.
They could have enrolled and then they decided to go to that school, they may have moved out of town, we're not sure.
Which is pretty common this time of year.
Definitely, for sure. Member Lofton?
Yeah, just maybe more of a comment, but I really always appreciate getting the September, October comparison as well as the end of the year, because we often hear from parents saying, well, why can't we have, you know, another class in the middle of August? And, you know, we know that there's always going to be some shifting around in September and October. You know, that happens, and so just appreciate that for that conversation as well.
I think an interesting chart would be to look at like 2019 before pandemic, to see where we're at now that we're kind of coming back on that. And so maybe that could be something we look at. Do we do another MDE report on enrollment like November 1st or January 1st or another reporting time? Or I know it's all the time actually.
Yeah, it's actually in March,
Oh, it's not till March, okay.
but I mean, I can ask Katarina to do something like that, to do like from 1920.
Yeah, you know, pre-pandemic.
It would be
Or
2019.
2019, 18, 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
And that's something I can then just provide the board in terms of an
Yes.
update.
Yeah. That's kind of the end.
Even 1920 before too, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Well, no, because the pandemic happened.
Yeah,
In
but that
March
was-
of 2020,
yeah,
but our
the
enrollment was
reported
pretty
in March
stable.
and
Yeah.
those were,
Yeah.
the numbers should be very similar to probably.
Use our October 1, 1920 numbers.
So we can provide that in advance, but there will be some additional conversations around enrollments and class size
Yeah.
guidelines somewhere in January and February. So we will be starting to have some of those discussions because I'm sure we may need to make some decisions as a district how we're going to provide some relief to sites that are over capacity. So there will be a lot of additional opportunities to discuss class sizes in the future.
Without breaking this chart down into school buildings, it's kind of pretty uniform in a way. There's not much deviation between, you know, we're deviating from maybe a low of 523 seems to be our lowest to our highest of 734 or so, you know, so that's not a huge, you know, that's kind of in the ballpark of consistent numbers of people coming to our schools.
In March of 2019, according to the same chart,
Okay.
we had 82, 84 students, so that's down 112.
Holy man. Good job.
I mean, they're all there.
Yeah, But you have your book.
upward, because last year we ended at 7 and change, so.
but that was 82, 84
It was 82, 84 in March.
of 2020, right when the pandemic hit.
In November of 2018, we were at 82, 66. So we're down.
We still are down, but we gained some back. Okay.
That's good. That's positive.
Always.
Always.
Well, when you think about what we've seen in the last 2 years with additions to charter schools and private schools and homeschooling and, you know, parents have been highlighted into other alternative options, but we still have significant population choosing us, so that's good.
So let's go to our next document. Let's go to the enrollment, elementary enrollment update. Because it's pretty straightforward as well in terms of what's here. So now we're going to go into class sizes at our elementary level.
Coming up here in case you guys have any questions, put this together.
Since you did, you want to go ahead
Is
and,
this the one?
you hear it. I can share it, but since you're here, you can take it over and share, walk through how to read the document.
And first of all, forgive me, I am an elementary teacher, you get lots of color on mine. But what I did here was I kind of included a few different elements, just for comparison's sake. And of course you have all the schools, totals to your right-hand side here. But the very first row in the purple is last year's June numbers. And then well, it's peach on my document, but that September 30th, 2022, in the blue font, that were the actual numbers in Infinite Campus that I pulled out of there. And so that was the enrollment. And then right below that, it's either in green or red if they've had additions to their school since last June or they've lost students. So you can see Stowe is down 5 students since last June, and Congdon is down 35 students. On this day, because we know this is a snapshot of the day, because we could have ins and outs, we were up 55 students overall in kindergarten through 5th grade, according to that day. And then if you go below that, you'll see I have a breakdown of all the grades, kindergarten, all the configurations, I will say, of grades. Because we have kindergarten, we have K1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, so I have all the splits in there. All the splits are highlighted in pink. And all just the other classes are just in white. So you can go per site and see how many sections of that standard class or the split class is in that school, and then the average class size of that configuration of the class.
So let's take a look at Stowe.
Yep, take a look at Stowe. So Stowe is 2 sections across the board right now. Kinder 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
For our community, they might know what a section is, but can you say what a section is?
2 classes at each grade level.
Is one section.
So like kindergarten has 2 classrooms.
Oh, got it, okay.
And that would be called 2 sections.
2 sections.
We call it sections, but
Sorry.
make sure that the community and
got
everyone
it.
else knows exactly what we're talking about.
And then the average class size of those 2 classes in kindergarten is 21 students.
Oh, okay. That's where I was
Yep.
thinking we have 21 kindergartners, so there's 2 classes with 11 or
There'd be
10 and
42
11. I gotcha.
And so that's how you read that as you go down.
So you'll see that the average across the building at Stowe is at 18.8 students, averaged.
Average class size.
Class sizes. So there's also more into this. So this gives you just a snapshot of the averages. So there might be a class at Stowe, let's stick with Stowe, kindergarten. There might be a class of 19. There might be another class of 23. Depending on how the site has determined the needs of students and populated those classrooms. So we're giving you the average class sizes, but I want to make sure that it's clear that it is the average, but there could be a class with fewer or more students at that particular grade level.
Could someone explain why that would happen? Why would you have, if you had 42, why wouldn't you equally break it out to 21 and 21 instead of something like a 25 and 19?
You probably originally would, but then you have students that don't show up for school. You have kids that already have moved, and we already have new enrollments. So we start, as the school year goes on, we might start losing some kids, and like one class might have 3 kids move. But then you don't move kids to even them out.
And see, compare that to that other document that talks about the changes in Stowe. So September, like Ms. Sparks was saying, or Director Sparks was saying, you know, in September, the enrollments looked a certain way, so the schools have already determined the classes, right? They created a class list, but then in October, a couple kids could move. So then now a class could go lopsided in terms of not having equal numbers. And then we don't go and say, okay, we're gonna take these 2 kids in October and move them over to teacher A's class. So it's allowed to stay that way. And then also, even before that, depending on the composition of the students and the needs of the students, there could be a situation where a building chooses class A and class B, but then a particular class may have
Higher students.
students with special needs could be in that class because more support is being provided for that class. It could be in the form of a para. I'm just giving an example. It could be in the form of a para, so then that class might have fewer kids in that class, but there's students with special needs are in that class. So they may have a teacher and a para, but they're sitting at 18, for example. But then class B could be sitting at 23, but it's because of the needs that exist in the entire group. So there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm just trying to give the board and the community understanding that just because you see an average, there's a lot more to it. And I want to make sure that it's clear that there are not equal classes throughout the district because of those kinds of things. Member Lawford Kemp?
Yeah, I really appreciate this discussion. Having 4 kids that have gone through the schools and working in the schools and have seen that. It might be helpful also for the community though to understand why we might do a split class and how that happens at the beginning of the year and how it's not just happening in one building. It often may happen in many buildings depending on the reasons you're gonna explain.
Yeah, and I think we have 13 on here,
Yeah.
13 splits, and what happens is there's either too few or not enough for 2 sections, and so then you have to kind of take 2 grade levels and make 3 classes out of it, and that's how we end up with the splits. It's because there's not enough for 4 classrooms, such as Lakewood, the next school over. They just never quite have, they actually do have enough for 2 sections at 2nd grade and 5th grade, which is great right now, like, that's a celebration. But the other grade levels, there's just not enough enrollment to make those 2 sections, so it becomes 1.5.
Appreciate that, and just, my youngest daughter was in a 3, 4, and I remember being a parent that was like, oh, my youngest daughter, who's 20 now, says one of her best school years was in that configuration, so I say that for the public.
Member Sandholm?
Yeah, I like the bottom bit there where it's showing enrollment comparison, 2017-18 to 22-23 for each of our elementary schools. And that's actually, again, helpful to see. So is the growth of Spanish immersion and our Ojibwe, our native language programs at Lowell part of the big increase there?
It's just balanced it to Lowell
Right.
away from other programs.
And
As a matter of fact,
specifically,
we have-
mostly from
Congdon,
Myers Wilkins and
Congdon, and then
And
Lester
and
Park.
Lester Park too.
Yep.
Which is great,
Which
because
is what we
it's,
kind of-
we
yeah.
created programming, that our
Yeah.
families wanted, and many families are taking advantage of that programming, and it's a thing to be, again, it's a thing to be celebrated. It also then causes the dynamics that exist here, where we have a building now that is, now the largest building in the school, and now needing additional resources.
And I included that piece because Adele actually found that 17-18 report in the board book that was actually given to you guys at one point. And so I thought it was very interesting, so I did it myself, and I thought, well, maybe you guys might like to see that, because
Well, we had,
it tells you a story.
Did we move something out of Lowell to create some space there on that backside?
Yes.
Early childhood program.
Oh,
She might know.
Barnes.
Yeah, the early childhood.
The early childhood
Barnes
program.
is,
So, back when, Spanish immersion was first starting, we recognized that we were gonna need the Barnes Hallway, formerly known as Barnes Hallway. So that wing used to be preschool programs, early childhood screening was always down low. A lot of offices and a lot of people that were working in that early childhood, like there was cubicles, there's a lot of cubicles and spaces. All of those have been shifted to other sites, which gave us the classrooms that we needed for that Spanish wing for the primary grades, so, yeah. So all those programs were displaced to different sites, probably around that time of 2017, I think it is about the time frame when it happened.
Remember Darren Peter?
Yeah, so we have 4 sections of kindergarten at Lester Park with almost 28 kids in an average.
We do. There's a lot of kindergartners over there.
I mean that, yeah.
And I think that also illustrates the need for us to begin to address the systemic things that are pushing, or not pushing, but the boundary areas and things like that for those schools, because if there are that many students coming in, we also have to consider our enrollment policies. We allow for significant degree of open enrollment, but I think it's important for us to consider, we do consider caps at certain points. I also know that for transfer requests, we have a transfer request mechanism quite often when transfer requests, when we meet for the appeals on transfer requests, they're oftentimes are granted. So I think we have to think a little bit about how can we thoughtfully close additional enrollment at schools that are giving that full.
So with the assumption that the average for Lester Park is 27 and a half, that means most likely we have sections with more than 28 kindergartners in there? 27 and a half?
I have those numbers, I can get them up for you, but, I'm not exactly, I think maybe one might
Yeah,
be.
like 1 or 2 might be.
Now, Lester Park did only have 3 sections of first grade at, in August. And
So now they-
so Lester Park chose to put an FTE they had into first grade because the class sizes would have been pretty big at first grade, bigger than kindergarten. So they had to kind of make a choice there, and they put that 4th section into first grade. So that is a choice that they made there.
So then do we know, or can that information be shared when we look at kids transferring between our schools, especially to Lester Park, and start, I don't know, doing something?
As far as
I'll
that-
answer that.
Yeah.
I'll answer that, and then I'm going to come to Member Locke. The answer is, those are the conversations, as I shared earlier, that we must have, starting January, February, as we move into next year and determining our class sizes. I mentioned the phrase class size guidelines. As a district, we're starting to have conversations on, do we establish class size guidelines, saying that we're going to, elementary, for example, say that we're going to upper elementary grades 3 through 5, saying if we decide to as a school, I'd say we would do it because everything has a big price tag by making these decisions. Even if we say we're going to say the average class size at 3 through 5 is only going to go to 27, right? We're going to cap it at 27. Anything above 27, we're going to automatically, as a district, provide a FTE to reduce the class sizes. While that sounds great, once we even our quick math, that ends up being a significant number of additional staffing, teaching positions that we would have to support with our general budget. And so we're going to have a lot of conversations around that. And in addition to that, you're right, we do allow some transferring to occur. Even right now, our open enrollment policy allows families who are not in our district to open enroll into a school of their choice. And most often they choose our East Side schools, and as a practice, we have allowed that to occur over the years, up until this year. So, because it's a practice, it's not a policy, I stopped allowing open enrollment applicants or applications, stopped allowing them to go to our East Side schools at this point in time. But we also know that comes with decisions around budgets, because now I've, in effect, prevented us as a district from gaining the resources for that. But I believe as a district, we have to be responsible. We have to think about if we're contributing to our own problems. Right?
And do you know if those students, when you didn't allow a transfer, do you know if they went elsewhere
In our district.
in our district, or just outside the district?
I'll call Michaela, then I'm going to call Member Locke Kemp, because I know she's been
Because I'm biting
eagerly
at the
waiting.
bit right now.
I know. Kayla, can you answer that question then?
They have stated their schools. We've given them the option to go to the west side, they stayed in Eastern Florida, so they decided to stay in those.
Thank you.
Member Locke Kemp, then I'll come back around. Is that okay?
I appreciate this discussion. I do, I guess, provide a little perspective, I guess, is that we have looked at enrollment numbers in the past. In fact, when Superintendent Grunset was here and we did Think Kids community meetings, one year the focus was on transferring in, transferring out, how many students were in their home district. And we shared that at meetings all over the city. And what was interesting was the numbers at that time were not striking as much in terms of the kids that were supposed to be in their district and the kids that weren't. And so I guess I would look forward to seeing those numbers again. And at that time, we did change our transfer policy a little bit to help prevent that exodus, if you will, or people coming in certain schools. And so we're saying this stuff, and I agree that it probably is happening, but I really would like to see the numbers on the kids that should be in that school site, the ones that have transferred out for maybe some of these reasons, or the ones that have transferred in and where they've transferred from. That was very interesting information, and I think when we went out, and I went to all of the community meetings we had that year, that people were pleasantly surprised that it wasn't happening in droves anyways, and that where we were getting kids in and where we were getting kids out. So I guess I'm a little nervous about this discussion a little bit when we're kind of saying numbers, but we don't have any hard numbers. And I think I look forward to that discussion and that information.
Member Oswald.
I served on the transfer committee under Assistant Superintendent Starzecki and Assistant Superintendent Horton, and during all those years that I was on there, I know that if class sizes were overloaded, the first thing we would look at a request that was denied, because it was automatically denied if they had a high enrollment. The first thing we would look at is the grade that they were going into at that they requested to go into in the school of their choice, and if it was too high, we wouldn't allow it, and we would actually offer them other options, and more often than not, these were kids coming from outside our school system in and wanting to follow their friends to wherever their friends were going because they lived there and that sort of thing, and we didn't really lose much of anything. It was pretty neutral, and to alleviate a lot of fears, there weren't a ton of people that appealed. If they're denied automatically, a lot of people just go with the denial and saying they tried. The transfer committee is based on appeals, and there are not a lot of people that appeal the first decision. In the past experience, I don't know how it is now. So, but I just wanted to let everybody know that in the past, it was, I would guess at the most 20 kids per year.
Member Oswald may remember when we made those changes to the transfer policy. I don't remember the exact date, but it was after those community meetings we changed the transfer policy at that time.
Member Davis.
Thank you, Member Oswald, thank you, Member Loeffler-Kemp. That gives a lot of perspective, and it's super helpful. I don't think the problems at Lester Park are because of transfer. I mean, it would just be interesting to see that number. I think the Lester Park problem is just boundary.
And if I may follow up, I think one of the easier solutions, based on the capacity of Lakewood, seeing that they all have, split classes, is if people would voluntarily move from Lester to Lakewood, we could eliminate those split classes and offer lower class sizes there, and while reducing Lester Park. That screams the easiest solution to me, but of course, when looking at a spreadsheet, we're not talking about emotions and connection and community and family and all of those things that add in that aren't on paper.
Member Simon.
Which was something I was going to mention along that lines too, and I don't know if we can survey those parents at Lester Park. I mean, I think the district should maybe offer transportation to help solve some of these issues, maybe at the elementary grade. Lester Park is maybe difficult to draw boundaries for because it would be closer possibly or more than likely to Condon, which is already a challenging situation in and of itself. And so Lakewood is the other alternative site. And for some families, maybe that would be close enough in proximity to where they reside, even though it's probably going to be farther away than Lester Park. But if the district could look at transportation options for those willing to do it, because again, just take kindergarten for example, you get a dozen or so families willing to do that, you could add another section at Lakewood and then reduce those class sizes at Lester Park.
Yeah, and not to get hung up on Lester Park, but being that is where my kids went to school and I know it well, one of the things that plays into this is exactly as Member Derek Eater said. I mean, in my new neighborhood of 15 years, we have like 80 kids under the age of 8 there, and they're continuing. And so that kind of you know, and they're just 4 blocks from Lester Park School, you know, so there's that. I also would be interested in finding out, school by school, how many kids, for example, that should be at Lester Park or Congdon or wherever, are now at our immersion programs. Because again, that certainly was our thinking when we put the immersion programs where we did, is it would draw from some of the schools with larger enrollments back in when that happened. So if we are compiling those numbers, that would be some numbers I'd like to see.
And we are, we have those numbers and we've been compiling them, and we're looking at everything because like you, we get the concerns from families regarding class sizes. As a district, we also have concerns regarding some of our class sizes, and but we also know there's fiscal realities, and so we have to consider all of the things that everyone's discussing. We're making sure we share this picture with all of you in the community to say that we're thinking about it. We are transparent with what is happening in our sites. We're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to make sure everyone knows exactly what's happening, but there are some nuances that happen in how class sizes are developed and the decisions that are made, and there are other things that play into how large some of our sites are, whether it's programming opportunities at Lowell that allows students to come and which is attractive, shoots up the enrollment. We have Condon, same thing, you know, in terms of families have opportunities, there's other options. There are some families who are choosing to enter into the immersion. So we have that information, we can provide the information at a future meeting. I'm not sure who's first, but I'm going to say Member Sandholm, then we'll come to Superintendent Magus.
And I just want to follow up on something Member Oswald spoke to earlier. Since I'm currently serving on the Transfer Appeals Request Committee, and it's hard to say no. It is, you hear stories, there's sometimes you have family situations that maybe they have a good reason for putting in that request to transfer to a different elementary school, a different middle school, a different high school. And it can be hard to say no, and we have had to say no in some of our recent decisions and in the past 2 years, I think. And you know, it's probably going to happen more often going forward because of some of the building situation. And we have where people are asking.
What I'm enjoying about this conversation is we are revealing a lot of stuff that happens internally that I think individuals don't know about, and then for you, Superintendent, is, you know, Member Sandholm does serve in that community. And so just know that when we get the requests, I look at the numbers. Our east side schools that are large, they automatically get a 9. So my office is the one that denies or approves right away. If it's wanting to go to the west side, numbers, they are approved. East side, if it's a large school that's over capacity, I immediately say no, but then there's an appeal process. And Member Sandholm is right. What happens then is the appeals committee makes a determination to either overturn my decision, which of course I never take offense to because that's how the process works. I just want everyone to know that internally we think about those things and we do say no to families who want it, but then there's an appeals process, and obviously the appeals committee has to hear the families and sometimes the students, and they make the decision. Superintendent Magus.
Sure. So as we're thinking about the way that we staff, there will be some pretty significant changes for the coming year. Basically, in our previous structure, the staffing largely went through the finance office as opposed to working more directly through the teaching and learning office. And so what would be the general overarching way of working is Simone, from a financial perspective, will set the financial targets. You know, we can afford 3 fewer people at this level or 2 more people at this level. And then Teresa, from the human resources perspective, will be putting the structure in place to make sure that the timelines are adhered to and that the processes are in place. So it's, and then the teaching and learning team, Mr. Bond's working with directors Larva and Sparts, will be monitoring these numbers and thinking and working this through on a very much on an ongoing basis, rather than this year was it kind of is what it is at this point, but I think it's important for us to, as we're setting the tone and as we're looking at allocation of resources, that the teaching and learning team that's responsible for the instruction has some oversight and ability to give input into that as well. I think that we're working really cohesively, and I think that that's going to be an important step in the right direction. It's also the way that things are done in most other districts that have been everywhere else. But I think it's important because there is a financial component to staffing that's huge, but there's also a leadership and learning component that is very important as well. So that's how things will work moving down the road. But I also, as we're seeing already, there are many, many things that are factors into this when we're thinking about boundaries, when we're thinking about immersion programming. That those are conversations that I think when we have our desired daily experiences clarified and our strategic planning clarified, that will create greater urgency for us to make some harder choices on some things, including if you look at Lowell, having 600 students at Lowell right now, that the cafeteria was built for 200-ish.
Yeah.
And so if you're in the Lowell cafeteria, you see a tiny little workspace with Amy, the main person there, and all our people they get it done, but it's super tight. So I think we have to decide to some degree, does the kitchen need expansion? Do we need to consider moving some of our immersion programming? Do we need to consider moving some of our non-immersion programming? All of those are things that I think are much broader questions that will be exciting work, but it'll be challenging work for us too.
Just getting back to the whole transfer in, transfer out, and that it sounds like that's information that you're planning on getting to us. Is that going to be part of our strategic planning discussion, where we would get that information, or where do you see, some of the questions I was asking about of knowing what students are transferring in, what's transferring out, students who live in the district attending the schools, and then students going to other choices within our district?
I think we can just have ongoing conversations at our monthly count meeting. So, we will, as we set the agendas, we'll make sure we have enough time to get those reports ready and provide additional information and have additional conversations at that time.
Thank you.
And one thing we haven't talked about, I'm so sorry. One thing we haven't really talked about yet are like the Laura Mack, Myers Wilkins, Stowe's of the world, where they do have a lot of extra funding streams that come to them because of the population of students there. And so if you look at those class sizes, that money's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And it is in those schools where it's supposed to be, so I think that's a good thing. It looks a little imbalanced, but it should be, because there's more money there to help those students, so.
And thank you for pointing it out, even though we haven't brought it up yet, because Director Sparks is spot on. So if someone from the community takes a look at this document and sees the class sizes, they may have questions. But some sites receive additional funds, Title I federal dollars, Comp Ed state dollars, and all of those resources then can be used to reduce class sizes. And so when you see class sizes that are lower in average, it's because those sites have the ability to, and they have done, some class size reductions using those funds. Which is also dependent on students filling out our free and reduced forms. So if the community is watching this, we encourage to make sure we encourage families to complete those forms, because our funding for those extra supports come from families completing those free reduced forms.
Another question, Brenda. Thank you. And I love your color-coded colors, rainbow colors. You kind of touched on this, but this might just again be helpful to expand on a little bit more about how individual schools can make decisions on where they're, like you mentioned, the school that increased first graders. I think that was West Back. Just can you expand on that a little bit, just to help people understand school-based decisions?
Sure, and I have a couple examples of that just happened this year. Because each school has its continuous improvement or site leadership team. And the school sometimes has to make choices based off the resources that they have. And like Lester Park, once they took a look at the enrollment for the fall, they realized that it had to be adjusted a little bit because they had way too many first graders. And so an FTE was moved and their leadership team made that choice. And they also look at data. Where did those first graders end at the end of kindergarten? And just like what Assistant Superintendent Bond was talking about, sometimes you look at the cohort of kids. Are they achieving at a higher level, or do they need more support? And so that continuous improvement team looks at all of those different factors and then weighs in on that. Another site that we did that was Laura MacArthur. Didn't have as many kindergartners show up this year, but had a lot of fifth graders. And so just this last week, we moved a kindergarten teacher from kindergarten and put it into fifth grade because it just was so lopsided and instructionally didn't make sense. So their site decided to do that, which is a lot better for kids. So that would be another example of the site making a choice based off the needs of the kids.
I have a follow-up question to that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so when you're talking about the site leadership team kind of making those site decisions, that totally makes sense. And it made me think of what you were saying, Superintendent Magus, about staffing changes and kind of how our budget's gonna work with our directors' teams. Is that gonna allow even more flexibility for our site teams to kind of make those decisions? Like I look at, if we look at Lakewood, maybe in this new world, they would have a little bit more flexibility to put in different sections.
I think it depends. I think that there are, we want to give kind of freedom within fences, that we have autonomous decision-making of sites to the degree possible, but we also have some things that are non-negotiables that we have to set too. So what are the guardrails that we want to set? If, let's just say a school said, well, we have all this extra FT and we're gonna pump all of our class sizes up to 35 and have 2 deans of students, we might say, we don't want to have that degree of flexibility, just as a for instance. So it's important for us to ensure that we're offering a relatively similar experience from school to school. Especially, we also hear that sometimes from our middle school principals as well, that when they have multiple feeder schools coming in, to make sure that students are coming in a relatively similar place and have relatively similar experiences is really important, and we know the research pans out on that too. But with that said, we also know that our site principals and the site teams, they know their school, and quite often the people that are closest to the work can make the best decision based on what they need. So it's some of both.
We were there, Peter.
I just forgot, so never mind. I've been holding on to it a little bit.
You can hold it,
and
it's
just
all right.
let it- No,
Huh?
it's so not important, so,
So-
yeah. And if I think about it, I'll just send somebody an email, it's just a question.
So can we move to secondary? Oh, sorry. Member Oswald?
I just wanted to ask comment. When sites set get their FTE allocation in the spring or whenever the budget's set or whatever, and the site decides how to use it, and they pull an FTE from a classroom side to offer something else, like maybe they decide to have a school science teacher instead of making all the teachers teach science, or something random like that. But then they come to fall and their class sizes need to be adjusted and they're crying for another FTE. How does that handle?
Carefully. I think that's part of the reason why we have to set some of those guardrails to make sure that it's within some degree of normalcy, but we also want to allow for some creativity. We have had situations sometimes where we've allowed for some flexibility with staffing, and then later ended up for certain circumstances. Sometimes we've added back because we want to honor the decisions that were made, but then because of our fiscal tightness, sometimes we've had to say, we're gonna dissolve something and put it into another area, like you're mentioning the shift of a kindergarten teacher at one school to a fifth grade. Everybody wanted to have low kindergarten numbers, and we honor that too. But we found at a certain point that the tipping of the scales went the other direction. So it's important to, and I believe that's, when I said that it's really important that the teaching and learning leadership team is part of those decisions, that's one of the really important reasons why, so that it can be done based on educational best practice and the needs of the district as a whole, as opposed to just singularly for one site.
Thank you for sharing that, Superintendent Magus, because in Roswell, we do have conversations with the sites as they're making these decisions. And so we are, our directors, myself included, we're working with them to discuss how they will be using their FTE. And when we have things that pop up, like someone saying they want to switch an FTE to a dean, well, that's time for a conversation. In terms of like, is that something that we can support? Because, there's some decisions we made across the district that we try to be consistent with. Because if we say one site can repurpose and get an assistant principal, for example, another site might say, well, I want to do the same. And then as we're having a lot of discussions around class sizes, right? And so to use that FTE to not put into the classroom to reduce class sizes is something that sparks a lot of questions and conversations. And so we have opportunities to change that before it's put in place.
I hope that's
Chair
addressed.
Wolfle, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna follow up, but I hope that's addressed in our strategic planning of classroom to boardroom, because I know that it's going to be a shift because principals move from advocating from their buildings to being district players, and that's a shift that we haven't had necessarily. So I hope that, we can all maintain district goals in mind too.
We seek to partner with our sites, and I'm not just using buzzwords,
Yes.
but that's the goal with our directors, is to partner with the leadership teams as things are happening, so that we can have the guardrails, so that we can make sure that we have influence on decisions that are made, so that we can improve outcomes for kids and accomplish our goals in collaboration with our principals. So if there's ever concerns, just know that we're trying to partner, but we're trying to maintain consistency. We're trying to make sure we achieve our goals. And sometimes someone may not like the fact that we said you can't repurpose that for a team. Chair Wolfle.
So yeah, it's become a reality too that we have all of our really strong leadership sitting right here with us having this important conversation. And I just want to thank you, because this is an opportunity for us as a board to really hear from our leadership, and this is a huge buzzword, class size. And I'm hoping our community will reference this. I'm hoping that even, I've seen this done in other school board sites, and I don't know if we're interested in going that way, but where, as school board members, we actually, send a link to this call meeting for our community to listen to our incredibly talented, thoughtful, experienced, insightful, and then a school board. As I look at the school board members sitting here, we all have experience in education, in teaching, in class size. So, you can't just come to a forum or to anything in our community or the newspaper and say class sizes are too big, or we're not. When it is such an intricate decision, and there isn't a blanket. I would be nervous to go into an idea where we could maybe set a guideline of 3 to 5 being at 27, because boy, 27 at one site doesn't look like 27 at another site. And so, those are all conversations that you're having and that you're well aware of, and it's just really interesting. And the other thing is it would be interesting too with the guidance of especially Director Spartz and Director Larva, is that board members could visit classrooms over the next year and watch and just be encouraged, just stroll through to see class sizes in operation so that when these conversations come to us, and I think we've all gotten into schools, we have, but sometimes we don't want to interrupt our instructors, our principals in a busy day. We're not quite sure if, when's a good time to go and just walk through schools to see class in operation, but maybe with the help of our team, you would encourage, opportunities at key times to just make us so that we have eyes on the buildings and the classrooms. I don't know, just a suggestion, not that we have to go that way, but again, I think class size is an easy word to say, and it is a multiple level type of issue, and it looks like our leaders are really handling it well, so thank you. Thanks for being here with us.
Member Larford, and then if we could go to secondary, that'd be great.
And I couldn't agree with you more on what you just shared, Chair Local. And I love going into classrooms too. I also, this discussion's made me think a lot about our role that we've been doing lots of training on the last year on being governance leaders in our district as well. And our role when we get parents contacting us about class sizes or split sizes or whatever, and how important it is that we are reminding them to go to their school principal, to their site to get their answers, not coming up with them ourselves, because they are the leaders within those sites. And so this discussion has just been a good reminder, I guess, to me, again, about our role as governance leaders in the district, and not the ones doing the problem solving when parents come to us on all things. Of course, we want to guide them and be a resource for them, but that resource around this issue should really be directly to their principal to get the answers. So I just reflecting on that throughout this as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Superintendent Maggis.
Sure, and as we transition on to the secondary portion, I think it's also important for us to, I'm appreciative of the board, because we had talked about maybe that we didn't really have a lot on the agenda, and we talked about that there's this need for this conversation, because I think by having the context of this will allow those governance questions that will be coming down the road to be much better informed when you're making those decisions. So I think that will be helpful. And so thanks to the board for encouraging this conversation. Secondary is exciting too, though, right, Mr. Robbins?
That's right. So on to secondary if we can. So
You don't get one nice little spreadsheet like you did with Mrs. Smarts, I'm just saying.
Director Lara, would you like to walk through this?
It's still colorful, though.
It's colorful. It's just a little bit different at the secondaries, and there's just so many more courses. It's not like you get a second grade class and you're getting one teacher, you get a million teachers over at the middle school and high school. So this one has been broken down. There are two different pieces and components here. The first 4 pages is a overview.
One second, Mrs. Director Lara. We are on the secondary sections all.
Yeah.
So secondary sections all tab document. The first page should be the one you see on the screen, which is Oregon East Middle School. So let's give them a second too.
So how we broke this down, and I'm going to explain it because it's going to look the same for the first 4 pages, okay? So it's a school site for this year. This is different than ADMs in the report that you got from Cattery. This is more about number of students in Infinite Campus enrolled in certain courses. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see the big broad categories on the first 4. So this first one at Bourdain East Middle School, you see the department is art. So this could be 6th grade art, it could be 8th grade art. We're just basically clumping everything together in this first one, okay? So in art, we have a total of 174 students that are enrolled right now in one of our art courses. 7 sections, so your average class size is 25, okay? That could be 6th grade and a combination of 6th grade and 8th grade there. English, you'll see, has 1,000 students sitting in seats in English. Well, that makes sense if we're talking about like 6th graders and 7th graders and 8th graders, so everybody is taking their courses, everybody has an English course. So there's 38 sections then, which brings their average class size to 27. So this is just a bigger broad stroke looking at it by departments on the first 4 documents, or first 4 pages of this document. So you can see Ordine East, and then you'll see, the other schools behind it. I'll color coordinate it.
Let me jump in for a second on that one. So also keep in mind, just like in elementary, these are just averages. So at 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, there might be different sizes, different number of students in each class based on the schedule that is developed,
And you'll
right?
see things broken down differently on the next few pages, but the first 4, I just wanted you to see this is kind of that big broad stroke. So when you're looking at Ordine East, you know, their average class size overall at the school is 29. You'll go to the next slide, which is Lincoln Park, and again, just like how Director Sparks was talking about how certain schools have different kinds of resources, the same thing happens here with our middle schools and our high schools. So there's different kinds of funding streams that come into Lincoln Park. They have Title I funding, just like some of our elementary schools where Ordine East does not have Title I funding. So you'll see that their average class size, when you break it apart, is down to 22. So in those different categories, you'll see like a different number of sections. Of course, they have a different student count too. They only have, in English, we had 1,000 kids, and how many sections that are Ordine East being split up. Here, English is 558 kids. So you'll see that there is a difference between the two, just in the number of students and the number of sections that are being offered, and then the class sizes that are a little bit smaller there at Lincoln Park. If you scroll to the 3rd page, same thing, we have Denfeld. So again, number of students, number of sections, and then the average class size. I want you to know that there are some things that are going to be a little bit interesting when you look at them, and one of them is engineering and industrial tech. So years ago during COVID, I remember bringing to the board a new course catalog and having to explain all the pathways for engineering. Rosie, you know what I'm talking about. These kids can take multiple different things, pathways, to get to the end of what they need in engineering and industrial tech. There could be one kid taking it at this level, sitting in the classroom with 20-something other kids, all taking different classes. I mean, if you go to Don Simon's room, I do not know how he manages. He's got like 6 classes during one period. Because he's got different kids that are in different course leveling of that. But it works. It really does work. So when you look at that, you're like, oh my gosh, engineering industrial tech only has 8 students in their average class size and 12 sections. You're like, what? You know, so that I just want you to have that as, you know, there could be one student sitting in one course and it averages out that way. That just skews our averages in some of those areas. So I wanted you to be aware of that. But when you take a look at their average class size, we're coming to 22 again, just very similar to what we had for Lincoln Park. Again, they have some additional funding streams as well at Denfeld. East High School is a little bit higher for their average site at 28. Again, they don't have the same funding streams, but you can see they have more students, but then again, they have more sections. So language arts, if you took that as an example, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I thought that was kind of a unique number for me. So we have 1492 total students in language arts. That breaks down to 56 sections though of 27. So it's just a bigger school, more kids that are taking some of those courses, and then that's how we're averaging out. You get to the next page and it tells a little bit more of the story of where kids are actually sitting in sections. So when you get to the further detail, we're taking those number of kids. So art was 174, 7 sections, average class size of 25, but you can see that Art 6 has more of the students in it, has more of the sections in it. Class size is 28, average class size for Art grade 6. And then cartooning and animation is that elective that we have in grade 8. So 2 sections of 18. So does that, you see how that reads out? So that's what it's impacting. We have 28, yes, we have 18, but the average ends up becoming 25 there for that. And we did that with all of our courses and our sections, and it is a lot of information for you to take in. I just wanted you to be able to read the document more than anything to start with. SWS, just for your information, when you're taking a look at the English sections there at Ordine, SWS stands for School Within a School. School within a school is students that are at Ordine East Middle School, but they are taking courses that are through the alternative learning center programming that we have. So these are teachers that are working with Nathan and his programming, but they're Ordine East teachers, and they're teaching like a smaller class size, and they might be pacing things different, and they might be doing things in a more non-traditional way for those kids to offer more support. So it's a level of support and intervention for students. So those class sizes are intentionally a little bit smaller, and the funding with that is actually tied to the ALC, not to Ordine East Middle School, if that makes sense what I'm trying to say there.
And it used to be called other things too, wasn't that like Focus? We had a time when we taught Focus 7th grade and Focus 9th grade, and that was a while, yeah.
Trans, read,
Trans,
there's
yeah,
different,
yeah.
you know, school within a school is really where we are right now with, so the middle schools have English, school within a school is math, and then in high school, there's, science and social studies as well, in 9th and 10th grade.
Do our students tend to transition out? Like, are the school within a school 7th graders the same school within a school 8th graders? Or if their skill sets improve, they go to our general?
It's not just based on academics, there's a whole list of criteria,
Okay.
that could impact a student and why they might be in it. A student experiencing foster care, you know, like,
Okay.
one year they might be in foster
That
care
makes
and they
sense.
might need a school within a school program. They might find more permanent housing and be the next year not needing that extra level of support. So there's a multitude of factors. There's a whole checklist that they look at and see kids that qualify. They look at some data, and just, you know, they want kids that are going to be successful in that type of environment too. So that's an additional support. I don't know if there's any questions specifically about some of these courses here.
Let's take questions. Any questions so far?
I don't have a question, but when I look at, let me look at Lincoln Park really quick, but I was looking at Ordine for the art, it just made me think of our other discussion on the middle school schedule. When we look at that, it's just art 6 and cartooning for 8th grade, there's nothing for 7th grade, so it just kind of made me look at that.
Yeah, when do you want an update on that? Not on your agenda.
And I see it's the same for Lincoln Park, so just see some
Thank you
things
for
that
putting that
made
back
me
in my
like-
head today. It never leaves, but thank you.
So just more of a comment.
Yes,
That's what
yes.
it made me think of.
Yeah,
So,
there will
but some of
definitely be
these things
more
are in-
art that is needed as we move forward, because we know that we're gonna have to offer art. Well, students are gonna be taking art in 7th grade and 8th grade where they're not required this year, or right now, currently under the current guidelines, they're not required. So we will be having more art offerings overall in our schools starting next year. That'll be reflected in classes offerings.
You belong for Kim?
I do like all of your colors. Thank you. On page 8, which would be the one of Lincoln Park Middle School.
Yep.
I'm sorry, family, food, diversity, and toll. What's toll?
Family food, it's not toll, that's shortened for something, tolerance, yeah. So, 8th grade offerings, there's actually 2 of them, and I think she just kind of combined them into one, because they kind of do that. It was this quarter. Family food, diversity, and tolerance. I have to go and look. It got shortened. So this all got pulled from Infinite Campus, and we only have so many characters in Infinite Campus, and so then it got cut off there.
Okay.
So we just pulled the report from there. Again, it's more complicated to do this report for middle school and high school. Hers was really easy.
But it's a very similar takeaway, similar to our elementary conversation. We have our east side sites, as you can tell by the class size averages, have larger averages or higher averages than our west side for the reasons we've talked about so much in elementary in terms of number of students that attend those schools and interest levels of those schools. And our West Side schools have additional resources that allow them to reduce class sizes. They have fewer students and they have the funding to then reduce class sizes. So that's why there's going to be a difference in the number of students in the sites, as well as, more importantly in this conversation, the average class sizes that exist. Also note, what you don't see in here, because we haven't talked about it, is and I'm making sure the community hears this too, we recognize the class sizes are problematic or not where we would like them to be as well, and on our east side also. Using extra dollars, we did provide relief to our sites. So our east side sites, for example, Oregon East Middle School received an additional, I want to say 1.6 or 1.8 FTE to reduce their I think they chose 6th grade and 8th grade math classes to put those into. So they added more sections of math in their 6th grade and 8th grade to reduce those sections. So the numbers you see here is because of the additional FTE they received. Again, it's temporary because we use ESSER. And then we also provided the same relief to East as well. So East also received an FTE to reduce some of its class sizes that were larger.
One other thing to note, when you get to the high school sections like Denfeld and East, we have courses that are career technical education courses that tend to have less students in them. We are, we have Perkins grant funding that supports those programs. We have the levy that I know that you've worked really hard on submitting as well. So we have additional money that does come into the district in order to support those programs, which, is important because we can't always have this huge class. I mean, in a nursing class, you don't want to have too many kids either in there too. So we want to make sure that we have the class sizes being what we can handle for those career technical education courses as well. So, and I don't remember exactly what is the back pay that we get for CTE, but it does help cover those smaller class sizes in those areas. 35%. 35%, yeah. Thank you.
Member Lockwood.
I know you usually kind of go into this, I think usually in January or something when we're looking at registering students for the year, and you talk more about kind of how that flow works once students decide and their families decide what classes they want to take. So I'm not asking you to go into that right now, but I think it is kind of important when we're looking at sections and all of that to know that there is this whole process that starts with the kids and families choosing, and then kind of based on those numbers, where the offerings are, and that are really based on the students and families and their choices as well. And again, I know you usually spend more time going over that, but I think I'm thinking about it as I'm looking at this. The other thing I'm thinking about is when I look at the music program and I'm seeing these huge numbers, which is great. I wish we were seeing more numbers there, but how do we support our music teachers that have 100 kids in orchestra 1 hour? What kind of supports are we giving them in middle school as well as in high school so that we're keeping those kids in the programs as well?
Yeah, there's music pre-COVID and music post-COVID, and we did push some supports in last year using ESSER funds, and it was something that we felt strongly about, that students had a year of music where they actually weren't touching their real instruments. So we did put in co-teachers, a co-teaching model. So it wasn't the lesson teachers that they had in the past, but it was more of a co-teaching model, and trying to reduce some of that class size for those students, because they had a gap here of really not having that exposure to their musical instruments. That didn't follow through to this year, I don't believe. I don't think that we had that additional funding put into place this year. So, but last year we did make sure that we had that year of recovery for those students.
Can I just chime in too when we're looking at, especially high school, because that's where I have some background too, but when we look at class size, and that, and we're looking at why classes are larger and what we can do there, or we're getting some community, pressure about class size, or our teachers asking why. Somewhat it has to be tied to your curriculum choices, of which I'm not so sure we've had a lot of conversation over the years on curriculum, because when you're a high school teacher and you want to offer a large variety of electives, that's also going to affect your class size, because we're staffing, but if we're only having if we had less electives, if you were willing as a English department to have conversation about, are we gonna offer creative writing, or is there a way we can funnel that into an English 11 class? Or are we gonna continue to offer a values as literature? Because that's gonna affect how we staff and how our class sizes go. So when you're trying to get your head around class size, especially in the middle school and high school, it's so many, just as many layers. Then the other thing is as an English teacher, I could have a class of which I did, 44 kids. But then my other hour was 18 or 20, and that's why averages are kind of nice, but they're also, oh, we want more. We want to see exactly, because, we're getting, parents saying my daughter's in an honors class of 38 or 42. Well, sometimes it's because if orchestra is offered for ninth graders during third hour, and then that's gonna push numbers into my fourth hour honors 9, because they can't come to me third hour. So there's so many variables as well, as far as, when we go to average, it's an average because Jill Lofald was teaching a larger class fifth hour when there were not any other ninth grade offerings conflicting. But if you're teaching third hour, and that's when ninth grade band is happening, that's when ninth grade choir is offered, that's where ninth grade Fayette is, then those hours I have less students, which funnels those kids into large class sizes. And that goes for biology in 10th grade or 11, it just is the way it is, and I don't know.
I appreciate you sharing that, because that's what makes it so complicated to share with the community, and we're trying to do our very best here and trying to let everyone know how complex it is, because it is dependent on that high school schedule and how it's built.
Yes.
And you just mentioned it, with that example, so I won't belabor that. But everyone has to keep that in mind, though. There's a lot of things that go into how class sizes end up the way they end up. And I think Principal Sipo would even say right now, if she was here, in some situations, even if we offered additional FTE capacity inside the building, it becomes an issue too, because where would she place these classroom teachers even if we had FTE? Not saying she would take more, but she would then say, where we're going to place them, because we don't have enough rooms open to do those things. And she would say, and I'm sharing this too with the community, because I love this conversation, because it's something that we're going to have to wrestle with as a community and the district this year. We also know that at East, probably didn't feel as well, there are a large number of students sitting in study hall classes. Huge numbers. And it's because either the schedule itself cannot accommodate the requests. We also have a situation in the district where we provide, which is some great opportunities for our kids, but students can also take online classes during the school day in our program, in our AEO program, which is a great opportunity on some levels, but it then also contributes to a class size problem or an overcrowded study halls, because those students, instead of being in the classes that are being offered third hour, they decided to take an online class and sit in study hall to take that class. So now we're wrestling with a lot of things. So what I'm trying to communicate is some of the decisions we've made in the past are contributing to some of the challenges we are faced with now, and we are going to have to wrestle with these things together. I'm sorry, I don't know who was first.
Go ahead.
Kirby?
Just a brief question. Where do PSEO students fit into this? Or are they not a great number?
So they're students that are actually attending at a college.
Right.
So they're not attending in
So they're not
campus
included
here.
in any of
So if they're taking like our math classes here, but they have an English class there, they're reflected in our math course, but their English number would be at a college. But we don't have that information because it's not in our system. So they don't enroll for PSEO in Duluth Public Schools. They enroll for PSEO at a college or university.
But we don't know how many of our students actually do that.
I'm sure.
We do know that. I mean, we
Is that
can
a
get
lot?
that
I mean, that's-
information. It's not reflected in here, but we can get that information.
Right, they're not in Infinite Campus, so that's why they're not part of this report, but we could very
Yeah,
easily put
but
that
college
together.
in the schools is taught by our teachers, so that's why you
I
see
know all
college
that.
in the schools
I
in
know
there.
all that, I just wanted to know how many students there are, because if they weren't going there, they would be here.
Mhm.
And obviously they don't want to be here, because we don't offer what they need. So, okay.
We can report back, I could follow up in my weekly update.
Member Laflacan?
Thank you for that, David, and I know you have a lot of experience with those two offerings, and it is an important part of this discussion, you know, and enrollment and all of that. I guess in terms of just celebrating, when I look at all the incredible offerings we give our kids in our district, it is pretty amazing. You know, including music, which we're, I think, one of the only schools that has orchestra north of here, but, you know, all of the different offerings, it's very impressive, and I just, you know, I know it from my own 4 kids attending, but, wow. Yeah, that's all. I just want to do a wow. I want to do a wow. We needed a wow.
We needed a wow.
We need a wow. We should do wow. Member Oswald?
I just wanted to comment on Member Kirby's comment that we don't offer what PSEO students need. I think that maybe in some cases, but I know at least at Denfeld, it's often sold as a way to save for college, you know, on college expenses, because it's free college, and a lot of our families need that, and not across our district, not just at Denfeld, because college is expensive and people want to save money. So.
It's free college depending on where you go. It's not universally free.
And there are some complications, you know, the Higher Education Commission has had some rule changes around which of our teachers can offer college in the schools for us. That has been pushed back periodically because of COVID, and so, you know, we're still trying to navigate through that, but, you know, we have to get our teachers so that they can teach college in the schools as well, and sometimes we drop off offerings of that because we just don't have the person that can do it anymore.
Those snotty college faculty.
Yeah.
I mean, the same is true of advanced placement courses too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and advanced placement courses too, you know, they have an exam that they need to take too, and some of the kids, that's not as appealing to them to have that as at the end of their course, taking that exam. And depending on when you take one of them, I think sometimes you take the course in the spring, the test is actually offered, or take the course in the fall, the test is actually offered in the spring. There's a long time to forget that information before that test.
Director Larber, would you like to walk through the AEO, AOC? Let's start off with.
I'll let you do that one.
How about the AEO only?
Do you have the ALC one?
How about refreshing? Hit refresh.
Okay.
And then you probably will see a couple other documents that come up.
Oh, okay.
So if you refresh, because I have to refresh as well. So if you take the AE, let's start with AEO only, AEO all document.
So, I've had some great conversations with Nathan about the courses that are being offered, and Anthony and Nathan and I actually have a meeting set up for tomorrow to really talk through more about where we have current enrollments with our AEO. There is guidance from the state that we can only have 40 students that are enrolled in any given course, and so we do know that. Nathan does a really great job of watching the numbers and monitoring those numbers for us. This was a really much harder to try to get to a average class size. So you're not actually seeing average class sizes here. What you're actually seeing is art, we have 22 students, that's the course that they are enrolled in, okay? So we probably just have that one section of art, but you'll see math. This year, we entered into a contract with Cook County, who struggled to find a teacher, an instructor there, and so through a contract tuition agreement, we have Cook County students now having algebra concepts, algebra 2, and I think geometry. There's 3 courses I think that we are offering through that contract. And so you'll see 336 students that are there in math. Some of them are through a contract with Cook County, and you'll see like 111 algebra 2 students. Well, what gets confusing, and so it was really challenging, is that we have a person who's teaching algebra 2, and they might have just Cook County, and that's all they're doing. So like, I think Peter Graves is teaching a class, he's just doing Cook County, okay? So that's all he's doing. But another teacher might be doing Cook County, and it wasn't quite full, so then it's pulling in some other students from somewhere else. So it's just really complicated to try to section them out. And then some of the Canvas, the Canvas shells and the course shells, I guess, that we have, there might be 1 student here and 40 students here, so it's just how it's broken up. It didn't lead well into class sizes the way that we were pulling the report from Infinite Campus. So, just stating that as it is, you'll see that where students are enrolling though in our AEO. I think that is good information to see, what are students coming to us for. You scroll down to the bottom, I'm really excited about under world languages, you'll see that we are now offering our Ojibwe Moan 1, 2, and our CIT 3 course through AEO. We were trying to find a way to maintain our Ojibwe Moan programming in such a way. We had really small class sizes, the dental, and really small, like they're really, really tiny, and we want to be able to continue to offer this. And there is an in-person component because we do have Nene Goisekwe on site. So she's going to sites and working with them, and she's got them during a win and all that stuff. So it's a blended type of thing, but it's mostly through AEO with having times to meet with those kids in person. So those are new offerings this year. And they are being supported through the ANI grant, and I think some of our American Indian funds as well, as we are trying to reestablish what Ojibwe Moan looks like, instruction looks like in our district. So yeah, it's been a hard thing to sustain. I mean, I think this goes back, Rosie, years and years and years where we've had Ojibwe Moan, and then we haven't had it, and then we've had, it's been one of those things where we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that we can consistently offer it to kids that want and desire it.
Have you seen that AEOs has gotten more staffing? Have we added FTEs to AEO because of numbers, or are they pretty consistent with what they had other years?
We've had, well, I don't know about, okay, so one of the things is that AEO, you kind of start out the year and you don't have as high of enrollments, and then it grows at different times of the year, and then where you end, so I think it's one of those things that you have to keep having those conversations periodically about staffing for AEO. I don't know if we can say that they're up or down or stable. I don't know where they're at. And we've added some this year, but I don't know if that was on top of what they had last year, or if we went back to what they had in the fall start.
Yeah.
They gradually add over the year, but then I think they kind of went back to fall, right? What they had the year before?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
we're working through that.
Yes.
And then that's why I know it sounds like as if we don't know. It's one of those things, AEO and ALC is pretty complicated because of the way the programming occurs. As you see here in the document, it says both comprehensive and supplemental. I don't know, people didn't ask, well, what does that mean? Well, comprehensive, according to the state and according to how we program, those are students who are with us full-time in AEO. Supplemental will be students, and most of them are our own students, taking classes, as I was sharing with you earlier. They may be taking advantage of the 0 hour, or they may be taking advantage of the opportunity to take classes during the school day while being in study hall, right? So those are part-time, I want to air quote part-time students, because they may be only taking 1 class here, 1 class there. So they're supplemental students. So it's really hard to give you some hard numbers on class sections that make any kind of sense. I know that's hard to share, but what we are really wrestling with right now is we're going to find a way to do it. We're going to find a way to quantify it, to make sure that it's comprehensive in nature and clear not only to us but to you and the community as well on what is really happening with our classes in AEO as well as our ALC. So give us opportunities to do that because we are working through how to capture information clearly. Member Sandra.
I guess I'm just curious, what, does MBE come down on us, or what,
Sorry.
does MBE come down on us, or how is that treated when we are offering these online sections that exceed that limit of 40?
They have not, no, they have not, but we do have to monitor that and be in
Yeah.
those, within those
Because I
guidelines.
think we'll just keep growing beyond 40, you're gonna get to the point where, we should be adding another section. And finding those teachers to do that. I do know we did
Staffing is
hire one of our
hard.
retired math teachers to come back and teach some online classes.
And-
And with our taking on another school district math department, we probably did add some staffing in the math department for AEO. didn't we?
Well, we ended up putting some teachers on overloads that were already within the district. Something that happened after we had the contract was we did have a teacher that left the AEO program, and so then we were scrambling a little bit. You know, it's hard to find math teachers right now. If anybody out there in the community is interested in math teaching, talk to one of us. We'll get you on our path. But the overload piece, you know, with our contract makes it challenging for WIN sections. Like if somebody's on an overload, and they could be, I mean, they're not at AEO, they could be at East or Dean East, and they're teaching an overload, well then that pulls them from the WIN. So I don't have WIN sections reflected in here at all as far as class sizes. Those could really vary. I mean, so if you're hearing things about WIN, those could be really vary, and you have to have teachers that aren't teaching an overload to be able to teach WIN. So it ties back to that contract as well, which makes other challenges at other sites as well with WIN.
And I just want to add a little bit and make sure Member Samuel and everyone knows that we are providing overloads for those sections. So that's when we say we're monitoring, we are as a district, and as soon as we'll be able to share that we have provided a significant number of overloads for ALC and AEO to make sure that we are taking care of staff who have overloads. So we are doing those.
And again, we're having another conversation tomorrow, so.
And once again, similarly to our conversation about elementary, that's one of the main reasons why it's important to have teaching and learning and our leadership supervisors to be integral to those conversations as well. Because when we're allocating resources, we want to make sure that we're doing so in a way that is fiscally prudent, but also best practice as far as how we put those things in place.
Do you want to go to the next document? Secondary, let's go to, according to this, it would be
Seat counts?
secondary ALC.
Secondary
Seat
section
counts.
ALC seat counts. This looks very similar to what the AEO one looks like. It's breaking this down for you into like a department and then how many students are in there. So we have art, there's 55 students that could potentially be in two sections. Now, what we do need to know is that they have a hybrid schedule at the ALC, so you might walk into an ALC classroom and be like, oh, there's supposed to be 42 students in this classroom and only 20 are in that classroom, because they might choose to be on site Tuesday and Thursday because they know they don't get along with somebody who's in there on Monday. I mean, there could be a number of reasons why kids are choosing the schedule that they have. So they have sometimes that they come in and seat-based, sometimes they're doing some things in independent study, you know, so there's a whole gamut to ALC, which made it really complicated to do this one as well. So what you're seeing again is the courses that are being offered through the ALC and the number of students that are signed up for those courses. We are if you look at the PE, we are offering PE through the Y, so they have kind of like a block scheduling going on too, because they need to travel, like to walk from the tech village down to the Y, and then do their gym class and come back. So there's a lot of flexibility in how programming is happening at the tech village there for the LC.
Just a question for the audience clarification. What does NTS stand for?
That's, I think that's just
Like
English.
Code or something?
It's like a code that just came out of it. I don't know what it
General
is.
directives,
Yeah,
SATs,
and you could just pretty much take that off. I don't know.
Now teaching students.
No, but.
Nice try.
Nice try. But, it's not all the courses, so it must be just something to do with,
Difference between AEO and ALC. Yes.
yeah. Because AEO has OLL also as a code there, which I think is online learning, and so NTS, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but they have things just coded a little bit differently for some of those Mars recordings.
Is it
Thank you.
non-traditional students?
Could be.
Could
I
be.
think that's what it is.
Non-traditional.
I think that's what it is.
We'll just decide.
We would have clarified. Member Sano.
Have we been able to offer an additional PBIS coordinator or counselor for ALC with their growing numbers and their growing challenges? I know that's, as Nathan asked for that. Because, I mean, we've added PBIS coordinators to both of our middle schools and high schools, correct? But we haven't, to my knowledge.
He has made the request, and I'm trying to think, in terms of MTSS, that has not been granted for our AEO. I'm trying to, our ALC, sorry. That has not been granted. They did receive a Check and Connect mentor. So that is one that they did receive.
At ELC, they have a full-time Check and Connect?
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
That's as of, and they did last month.
It's important for us to always continue to consider those areas.
Anything else?
In our ALC, are these typical students that live within our boundaries of Duluth Public Schools, or are they also from outside our
They
school
could
district?
be from Proctor, or
Okay.
Midtown, they could be from outside of the school district as well.
And that's with the title Area Learning Center, that's part of the.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to geez, Jim, no, was not trying to make it.
Sure, John.
Sorry.
Superintendent, yeah.
I'm sorry. What I was meaning to say is that the concept of Area Learning Center is to draw from a small region, but not just to be exclusive to the district.
Yeah, I've heard that their numbers are up and they've kind of reached capacity in the building, in the space leased for them. Is there additional space at the Tech Village that we could maybe add to our classrooms?
I know we have additional space at the Lake Superior College, and then there might be some opportunity for within the sites, but I'm not sure if there's where we are with space needs.
I guess let me chime in with that. We've heard that as well, and that's why we are getting ready to engage in deeper conversations on what are the true needs. And so we want to verify that that is truly the case, because we have, as we're sharing here, we're being very transparent. How classes at ALC and AEO come together, and the reports that we receive, we're trying to decipher what is the true need. And so we are trying to, as an administrative team, really dive deep into actual numbers to see if there's a need there, because if there's a need there, we want to address it. But we're asking, we've asked the leadership there to work with us, and they have. We're going to be meeting with them tomorrow to really dive deeper into the numbers and see what the needs are. And if there's a need, we will definitely consider those things and have greater discussion.
Thank you.
Member Oswald?
Does the schedule at ALC still work within mornings or in person and afternoon or online? how they try out that schedule for more online learning? Or is it back to the way it was?
It is more of in-person rotations, I think more in the morning, and then there's that connection time that kids can come in the afternoon, but, it's definitely a hybrid schedule. It's a non-traditional schedule, so, you know, like they alternate when classes happen, and I
Maybe
can't,
that's what NPS is.
and that is non-traditional students, she looked it up. She looked it up, so that is not traditional students. It is, you know, and it is a non-traditional environment, so there is definitely more flexibility that's offered to those students there.
And is there still an after-school component also for students that aren't in the core program or not?
There are designated times for different types of students to be able to come in. So like students for AEO might have a time schedule that they would just come in and drop in for their drop-in times. We have credit recovery, so there's a whole bunch of different
That's what I'm
components
getting
with it,
at,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. There's credit recovery, and so we have credit recovery teachers that might go instead at Denfeld and at East and help support there as well. So it's, the teacher schedule is very different at the ALC, you know, because there's lots of different components that go into the programming there.
Sure, and you know, I'm most familiar with the old schedule of, you know, there was 100 students allowed in the day program or what was considered the traditional school day, and then other students came before or after school for other help, including students that may have been expelled or need to have non-traditional or non-school day based education aren't allowed that. So that's what I'm asking, is 110, you know, or the total amount of students within all of those programs, or is this
That's
just?
not credit recovery, that's the ALC true programming that's in our, yeah, there's
Alright.
so many different facets, so.
And so I wanted
Yeah.
to make that clear that like credit recovery people that have to take an ALC component aren't included in this. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And for lawful,
Because we do a
Clear
lot.
as mud.
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up with that, is there something going on after 6 o'clock at night there? Or is everything kind of wrapped up at a certain time frame at ALC? And then my kind of second question then is, students, you know, from my knowledge of the program anyways, kind of come and go at different times. And so there probably is not 110 students there at one time because of all these different, meeting all these different needs. So am I right in
You're right in
characterizing that?
that not
Yeah.
all students are there like full-time all day long. You're not seeing 110 kids when you walk in the door. You know, I've been out there at lunchtime and there might be 20 kids maybe sitting there, depending on the day. And as far as when they wrap up, I feel like in their contract it says 5 o'clock, but I'd have to double check that. I'm not really sure, but they have, in their contract, they work those extended days. Teachers do Monday through Thursday, and then they're not working, they're off contract on Fridays, but they do have longer extended days, and it's either 5 or 5:30 somewhere in there. I can't remember which though.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Member Sadowski?
Yeah, speaking of like the complicated nature of the scheduling and things like that, I know the ALC has historically only had one counselor. With the addition of the math classes from Cook County, right? Do we know if our counselor's getting any extra support on that end? Like with at least helping schedule the Cook County students?
No, we haven't had any requests for any additional counselor support. The enrollments really fell onto their clerical staff. So, that was probably a heavy load on them enrolling all those students, from the Cook County contract. Would probably have fallen more on them, because the counselor isn't really counseling those kids. They're getting their counselor from Cook County still. It's just more they're enrolling here for
Those are
math.
AEO kids.
I was gonna say, and they're
Oh,
AEO
right,
kids.
Yeah.
AEO, I was
Yeah.
I was gonna clarify
that's
that.
true, thank you.
But there is a lot of overlap.
There's a
with-
lot of overlap,
With
yeah.
AEO and ALC,
There is.
and as Member Oswald, you know, brought into the topic or discussion here, you know, the credit recovery,
Recovery, and-
which has grown over the last couple of years,
Especially.
and probably continues to
It's a lot to schedule.
add to their load.
It's a lot to schedule, it's a lot for us to make sure we are wrapping our heads around how all of these blending of opportunities come together, so that as administrative team, we're always we're saying is we're being transparent. We want to support our ALC and AEO like we support all of our other sites. We just need to make sure we have all of the information and that we're clear on how programming is really occurring, because if there are needs there, we want to address those things in partnership with the site leadership. But it's a complicated.
It is complicated.
This is all of our programming. Obviously, when we bring all of those opportunities for our families and for our students, it can be tricky to navigate, but we were confident we're going to get our heads wrapped around it and provide another update for the board and the community regarding programming there. Sure.
If we are offering our ALC, and I think the AEO staff is also on a 4-day, 10-hour day. So Friday, do we pay a lease rent on our facility at our tech village? So we're paying for 5 days.
Or it's a,
I'd have to look at
I
that.
believe it's considered like a year-round.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. So if there's need, and I know it's in a contractual, so probably not gonna happen, but if we need more space, or if they determine they would like more space, then maybe there's some opportunity on a Friday for more instruction on that day, which then, you know, the building is kind of wide open, instead of branching out and trying to lease more, which is, you know, I don't know, lease rent. Does our lease go up with the fluctuation in our housing, or our inflation of our country? Stays the same?
It stays
the same.
Okay, that's good.
And that, I don't know if there's a hand over here, but that also, I want to remind the community and the board as well that we will be having some further discussions regarding phase 2 programming for our ALC, AEO. Right? So as we communicate to the board and the community, that we would be following up on that. As a matter of fact, we have some meetings set up in the next couple of weeks with state to start looking at programming for our ALC and AEO, and maybe some potential other opportunities. So we're going to have more information about the programming, and then that will influence what kind of space we need, right? So it depends on what we end up providing in terms of opportunities, or continuing or not continuing. That's going to determine a lot of different things. So more information, but in the interim, there are needs, and we know that we are, want the community to be assured that we are providing support for our AMC and AEO staff in terms of overloads, and we are wrestling with how these things play itself out, and if there's additional needs, we're going to be considering those things.
If you went down there on a Friday, there are people there. Our administrative team is probably there, our other support staff is probably there. You might have teachers coming in too. So it's not
Yeah,
like
it's
it's locked up.
Yeah, I know, I know that.
Thank you for clarifying that, because that's true.
And maybe some could switch to a Tuesday, Friday schedule instead of a Monday, Tuesday schedule too. I mean,
There's no way to be creative.
Any other general comments or questions regarding enrollment or class sizes?
This is kind of an interesting factoid that's peripherally related to this. In one of the recent issues of the Atlantic magazine, there's an article by the former president of Harvard, who said that kids cannot read cursive. And in fact, in her classes, and professors will write comments on papers that kids will ignore because they can't read them. They don't get feedback, which is fine. But then this Saturday, there was a rally for peace at Leif Erikson that was focused on gun violence prevention. And one of the speakers there was a survivor of the Parkland shooting, who was 22 or 23. And there was a question and answer period afterwards, and during this he said, "Oh, this is in cursive, I can't read this." And he had to have somebody else read this question that was written. So, my question is, do we teach cursive anymore in the elementary grades?
Neither of my kids.
I think,
I felt like that was part of our handwriting committee but I don't know how far they got. They're changing our handwriting.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've had some meetings with preschool too, and we've been talking about alignment of handwriting from preschool through 3rd grade, sorry. And so we've just been talking about handwriting, and it's interesting, that's a whole interesting subject, by the way. Because
Oh, yeah.
cursive, printing and typing are all different parts of your brain, So there's a whole developmental piece there too, if you do the research on that. So I don't exactly know, but it's a really good question, and we've just started talking about that.
We don't have the bomber things up along the wall.
My
They're
kids
still
got
there.
cursive.
Mine
Well,
are
good. I mean, I don't know.
I'm not sure,
Yeah,
but thank you for bringing that up.
it was just interesting.
Yeah, no, it is very
And if a
interesting.
college professor is writing on your paper, you need a new one. Go to the computer and write the comments where the kids will read them, they won't read it on the paper.
Well, this college president said at the end of the article, I don't know if she'd written a book or something, or signed a yearbook, but then asked the student, do you want me to read it to you what I just wrote? He's a graduate.
Any other questions or comments
That's just a
related?
fact.
I'll find out for you.
Okay.
Member Larford,
Okay,
sorry.
I just want to kind of take the opportunity, Brenda and Jen, to thank you for all the work you did putting this together and the great conversation we've had. And it's very clear your roles as we switch to this model of having teacher and learning directors at the elementary and high school level, how key they are to facilitating collaboration, facilitating feedback from our staff who are doing the work, facilitating relationship building, and it came out in lots of ways with this discussion today. And so just really thank you for your leadership. We don't get to say that as often, and I know you do many, many meetings in a day, and just scheduling those meetings in itself is a job in itself. And so just thank you
Well,
for
thank
your
you
work.
very much, and I'm gonna speak for both of us. We both enjoy this job so much, and it's just a passion that we both have, so it's a lot of fun too. Thank you.
That's good to hear. Thank you for lifting that up too.
Other
I'd just
questions?
like to say thank you as well for recognizing that, and as we consider how are we continuing to address the needs of our district, when we're thinking also about the identification by the state and ensuring that we're continuing to support our schools as well as possible and lift those schools, having that conversation about the permanence of those positions will be something that we would like to consider in the very near future.
Jill, that concludes our.
There's one more, I was looking at this last ALC departmental totals,
Oh,
but
it's just
we
the
don't
same,
need that,
you don't need
yeah.
that, I know, it's just the same.
I was deep in thought about another question, but I don't need to. So, thank you, yep.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm back.